Good evening. We are here for another meeting of the Parents Advisory Council, and thank you to our larger community audience for joining us as well. It's great to have everyone with us this week night. We are now, it's hard to believe, we are now 1 month into school. I'm very proud of that fact. Actually, we're in week 5, and moving forward here. I think we have a lot to celebrate, and as always, we continue to look for ways to improve. Recently, we've received guidance from the New York State Department of Health, and I know last week we postponed because Dr. Whalen had to postpone because there was another update coming from the Department of Health. That was not exactly a significant update, and we are having that meeting with Dr. Whalen, and that is scheduled for 12:30 tomorrow. But tonight, we want to give you the current state of guidance that we have from the Health Department. We realize that guidance is complicated, complex. We're going to try to break that down for everybody to make it as clear as possible. Hopefully this will be helpful to our Parents Advisory Council as well as to our larger community. And of course, we will be posting this on our website. And so I think without further ado, can we bring up the slides, Ms. Skeels?
Sure. Mr. Core, would you like to introduce Mrs. Dawson since Mrs. Coffey is no longer here?
No, I never want to take Mrs. Dawson for granted. We celebrated the retirement of Mrs. Marion Coffey, who dedicated 22 years of her career working for North Colony. And I happened to be with her, and it's amazing that given that fact that she lasted as long as she did with us in the district. But I was very blessed to be able to work with Marion Coffey as my assistant, and I would also say probably work for Marion Coffey, because she was a consummate professional, she was kind, and she was generous. And so now we are blessed with another long-term district employee, Jane Dawson, who is kind and generous and professional. And we are very fortunate to have Jane with us tonight in her first night with us as assistant to the superintendent and running our PAC meeting. So Jane, welcome. And again, formal congratulations in your new position here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right.
So, okay, so tonight we're going to take a look at some of the governor's updates with regard to recent developments regarding public health. We're going to outline the Department of Health updates. We're going to also highlight very important collaboration that we've developed throughout the time of the coronavirus with the Albany County Department of Health. And we will also show some resources for parents, which we will also post up on the web. I think also right now, to be clear, I am not a public health expert. I know more now than I did in March, but I am far from expert on that. I also realize that on this committee, we are blessed with physicians, people who are in the area of public health who work for the New York State Health Department. I don't claim expertise, and certainly if we do get something not clear or not right, please feel free to interject. But I think we have done a good job here of distilling down the most recent guidance, and this is really the state of the guidance we are getting from the various agencies at this particular juncture. So when we take a look at the recent events here in New York State, and particularly in the greater New York metropolitan area and in the southern tier around Broome County, there's been spikes in the coronavirus. So Governor Cuomo has initiated something called the Cluster Action Initiative. And there are 3 steps that are involved in this. And so it is a very focused approach to dealing with the virus. So it involves taking strong action within the cluster. And then, considering the fact that this area is an area that is currently deeply impacted, looking at the surrounding areas. And so also taking corresponding in those areas to stop spread. And then even taking an additional step by calling for precautionary action in outlying communities. And these have great impacts on schools. And so the clusters in outlying areas are separated into red, orange, yellow colored zones. There are corresponding levels of restrictions. I'll show you those. So this is an example of what is impacted here. And so these restrictions are for 14 days. And we mentioned here Broome County, that's where Binghamton is located, Brooklyn, Orange County, down near the city, Upper Queens, Far Rockaway, and Rockland County as well. And so the 5 areas where activities are structured, and this are the areas of worship, mass gathering, business, dining, and schools. So if you are in the red zone, you can see the limitations there, but if you look down to schools are closed. In the orange zone, schools are still closed. Again, that is a precautionary area. And in the yellow zone, and I think this is the most impactful for us. So houses of worship are at 50%. Mass gatherings are limited to 25 people, maximum in and outside. Businesses will be open. You can have indoor and outdoor dining, 4-person maximum per table. Schools are still allowed to be open, and this is the area that we are grappling with right now. And that is in these yellow zones, there is mandatory weekly testing of students and teachers, staff in person settings. And the Department of Health did set the percentage on this. It's 20%. So if we were to take a look at North Colony in terms of the total population of the district, that could be about 1,400 individuals tested every week. And that would include staff and students. So the question school districts are grappling with right now, and the question we will pose to Dr. Whalen next week is, does Albany County have the capacity, if Albany County is designated a yellow zone, to conduct literally thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of tests on a weekly basis to maintain an open school. And I think that's important to note. I think it's also important to note that the test that is required for individuals who are 18 years of age or younger is a different test than the adult test too, and they are in shorter supply currently than other tests. So this has great impacts on schools, and we certainly want to get a sense from Dr. Whalen, as do our colleagues in Schenectady, Saratoga, Rensselaer County, as to the respective counties' capacity to host testing. It must also be remembered too that counties do not test. Okay, there are various agencies. The New York State Department of Health has a site over at the University of Albany, but the rest of the sites would be sites. We have one here in Latham behind Community Care. There's one in Albany off of Holland Avenue at a Walgreens. And I know this week that Price Chopper started a drive-in clinic. So there are more and more spots open and available for testing. The turnaround is getting quicker and quicker. At Holland Avenue, it really is an hour or two to get testing results. But these tests are, certainly it's an issue that we will have to deal with. So we do have one question in the chat I see from Margie. Who will pay for these tests? Do these tests also have to be back within 48 hours or risk being reported as positive cases? So actually, we don't have definitive guidance on this right now. I know, for instance, that Holland Avenue, and I would believe the Price Chopper test location is a free test. I would assume that these cases would not be reported as positive, okay, given the volume that exists there. But there has not been, and I think we have to be careful, as there's a difference between being reported as positive and tested as positive. And Michelle, rapid tests are acceptable, not just for the district, but by the Department of Health as well. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So these are some of the basics here. So let me just go through these right now. We are not a testing site, so the school district cannot perform COVID-19 tests. We're not in a region that has been identified by the governor, and actually school districts cannot mandate. We can strongly suggest that an individual get a test, but we cannot force them to get a test. We are partners with the Albany County Department of Health when a case is identified within the district. So if we become aware of it, our first call is to the Albany County Department of Health. In some cases, the Department of Health could also call districts and notify them. But our standing or operating procedure has been that anytime we have a test positive and it's identified to us, and even if it is in another county, we notify Albany County Department of Health. We also do not have the power to isolate or quarantine. That sole authority results with the health department. And I think it's important to clarify terms here. So when a person is placed in isolation, that is a term reserved for the person who tests positive. Quarantine is reserved for direct contacts within the positive case. And a contact or a direct contact is identified as anybody who's been within 6 feet of the individual for a period of 10 minutes or more with or without a mask. Okay, so those are the fundamental terms that really, those are the basics that need to be known. We worked closely with the county in the investigation process. We share possible contacts, and the County Department of Health will then determine the appropriate steps for the people involved. So we will share with the county the amount of time that the individuals had in contact, what was the nature of the contact, what was the proximity, were they masked or unmasked, and a number of variables that we will share with the county. And the county will then follow up and conduct their own investigation and probe deeper on some of those facets. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, other privacy laws prohibit us from disclosing or confirming any personally identifiable information. So we will certainly be protecting individual privacy, but we will be transparent about notifying the public when we have a case. And so now we have health guidelines and the updates from the New York State Department of Health. And for that, I will turn it over to Ms. Keels.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kaur. So first we'll go through, this is not an update, this is just a reminder. I think we all know this now of the COVID-related symptoms. So it is a fever of 100 degrees 0 or higher. It could be shortness of breath or difficulty breathing. It could be something like runny nose or congestion, which we know lots of people have this time of year just related to seasonal allergies, fatigue, muscle or body ache. So these are some generalized symptoms: cough, a headache, a new loss of taste or smell, perhaps a sore throat, perhaps nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. All of these could potentially be symptoms that are COVID related. But one of the things we wanted to bring back was a slide that we had shared earlier during one of our PAC presentations. And that was that Mr. Kaur and I had attended a webinar through Harvard Medical School, and Dr. Saida had invited us, so thank you for that. And Dr. Fauci did a great presentation to us, and I took a screenshot of this slide because from all the data that they're seeing, this represents the most commonly occurring symptoms. And I think this is important because that list on the previous slide, we could have any of those on any given day. But for 83 to 99% of the people, they're going to present with a fever. That's a very high percentage. That is why we are asking you to take your temperature. That is why we're asking you to take your child's temperature and make sure that there is not a fever. The next greatest is the cough, from 59% up to 82% of the people have a cough associated with it. And then a general fatigue from 44 to 70%. So those three are really the ones that most people present with, whether you're an adult or a child. So we wanted to kind of highlight this again. The other one is anorexia. There's a real loss of appetite with this. Although the low end is 40%, notice that the high end is 80. Any kind of stomach issues, you just lose all interest in eating. Shortness of breath is far down from that, and myalgia is also far down from that. And then the others that we talked about on the previous slide, sore throat, nasal congestion, etc., are just kind of some non-specific symptoms that have been reported, but not with any consistency across people, across as this virus has progressed in the country. So really, as you're evaluating your health, your child's health, your family's health, it's the fever, the cough, fatigue, and perhaps the loss of appetite. So what we wanted to do was break down the guidance, which is very comprehensive, but because it's comprehensive, it can also be confusing, and answer some questions that we think you might have as parents. And the first is, so what if my child is having symptoms that are consistent with COVID-19? Well, first, we know from doing that daily attestation, if your child has symptoms, you're told that your child should stay home from school. If your child comes into school and develops those symptoms, you know that the nurse's office will call and ask you to have your child home. So let's say one of the two things has happened. Your child has awakened and has these symptoms, is not feeling well, and you keep them home, or your child has been sent home from school. How do you get your child back into school? What are the protocols? So first, obviously, anybody, whether you're, and we want to be clear, whether this is a student or an adult who works for us, we're giving the same advice. You have to stay home from school or work if you're sick. We always want that, but it's more important, obviously, now than ever. We strongly recommend, and again, this is what Mr. Kaur said before about the testing, we can always recommend, but a parent can choose what they think is right for their child. We strongly recommend that you have a consultation with your healthcare provider. If you don't have a healthcare provider, the Albany County Department of Health has a general number where you can call, and we suggest you have that consultation within 48 hours. The healthcare provider may be able to direct you in a way that helps with anxiety or stress and helps to get your child well in a quicker time. The consultation does not have to be in person. We live in a technologically savvy world, so the consultation could be a visit, but it could be by video conference or it could be by phone conference, depending on the healthcare provider's preference. Per New York State Department of Health regulations, and this is an important one, and this is something that was already referenced earlier in one of the questions. If we were to send a child home from school and the child was exhibiting symptoms, and our nurses said, these are symptoms that are consistent with COVID, or you call your child in sick, the nurse talks with you and says, these are symptoms consistent with COVID. We recommend that you have a consultation with your healthcare provider. If you choose not to do that, within 48 hours of the symptom onset, and our nurses will check in with you, we as a district are required to report this to Albany County Department of Health as a potential case, not a positive. Nobody's saying it's a positive, but we just want it on their radar. And that is a New York State Department of Health regulation. That is not a North Colony idea. So we would let them know. They may choose to follow up, or they may say to us, okay, let the parent know the child has to be out for 10 days. And depending on the severity and depending on what they see as the right protocol, they may follow up directly with you, or they may instruct the district to follow up. If they decide to follow up, they may decide that they have to begin contact tracing. So again, this is the abundance of caution, because our whole goal is to keep children in school and stop the spread. So this is really, if your child is showing symptoms, we really encourage you to have them checked out within 48 hours. But if that doesn't happen, we do have to report that. It's almost like a mandated reporter status. So, okay, you might make that decision for your child, and that's perfectly fine. So what if you choose and say, no, I'm not going to go to a healthcare provider? So first, we do have to report it to Albany County Department of Health. So we want you to know that. And the nurse would also tell you that. Your child must remain in isolation at home and is not able to go back to school until the health department has released them from isolation, which they may do directly, or they may direct the district to tell you that. That will typically be 10 days have passed since the date of the first symptoms, and the child's health is improving, i.e. the symptoms are going away, and the child has been fever-free for at least 72 hours without the use of fever-reducing medicines. So you can see, in an abundance of caution, with no evidence to say it's not COVID, because there isn't a test or there isn't a doctor visit with an alternate diagnosis, we're going to proceed as it might be in order to keep everybody safe. It's a very cautious approach. It is what we are mandated to do.
Ms. Skeels?
Yes.
Or means or, correct?
I'm sorry?
You can either, if I choose not to consult with my healthcare provider or seek a COVID test for a symptomatic child, or means or on that. You can do either, is that correct?
That is not for symptomatic. That's later for if they're a contact.
Right.
So here, the first step is they have to, within 48 hours, be seen by a healthcare provider. Then they have to follow the healthcare provider's guidance. And that's actually coming up on the next slide, Mr. Kaur. So let's move ahead with that. Okay, so let's say you do take your child to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, this is the allergies you always have at this time of year. This is a sinus infection. These are things we know, we've seen before. So your doctor may examine your child and say, I know that this is a chronic condition the child has had in the past. These symptoms are unchanged. Or the doctor could confirm that it's a sudden onset acute illness. So it could be that your child, as we get a little bit later into the winter and the flu comes back, does a lab test and turns out it's the flu. The doctor could do a lab test and it turns out it's strep throat. And the doctor confirms that and also believes this is not COVID-19. It's not suspected. Then we will require, and again, this is not we, North Colony, requiring it. We are requiring it because the New York State Department of Health is telling us we must do so. We require a note that is signed by the healthcare providers that explains what the alternate diagnosis is before the child can be allowed to return to school. So with that, your child can then return to school following the usual guidelines for that diagnosis. So if it's influenza and you have to stay out for a couple of days, you'll follow the typical pattern for returning to school. But we do need that in writing from the healthcare provider. Now, here's something interesting. Please note, signed healthcare provider note, so not the parent, but actually the provider note documenting an unconfirmed acute illness, such as a viral upper respiratory illness or a viral GI problem, that will not suffice because those are not laboratory confirmed. So that is not enough. In that case, we would also need a COVID test saying it's a negative COVID test because those symptoms can mirror COVID. So I am happy to share a case study because it is my case study, so I can share my information. So last week I had a very traditional sinus headache. I'm very prone to them. I have really bad allergies. I get sinus infections quite regularly and have for years. I know the symptoms. I know exactly what it feels like when it's coming on. I felt that way last week. However, I also know that those symptoms mirror the COVID symptoms. So I had to speak with a doctor, right, within 48 hours. And because a sinus infection isn't something that I can get a laboratory test for, the doctor will examine me and kind of decide, yes, this looks like a sinus infection. Because there's not an actual laboratory confirmation like there would be for strep throat, I had to get a COVID test. And I had to get a COVID test saying, nope, I was negative for COVID. And that negative COVID test is what allowed me back in. Now, if I had gone and they said, oh, this is probably strep throat, and they tested me and I got a laboratory result saying it was strep throat, that would have sufficed. But because there isn't anything comparable for something like a sinus infection, I had to get a COVID test. So that's where it gets a little tricky, but that's why you talk to your healthcare provider. And again, if you don't have one, the Albany County Department of Health has a general inquiry line, and it's staffed all day and it's staffed on the weekends, and you can call them and they will help you through that process. So what if you talk to your healthcare provider, as in the case where I did, and they say, you should get a COVID test. We think you should get a COVID test. Your child should definitely have one. Okay, so the first thing to know is your child has to remain out of school until the test results come back. And then two things are going to happen. Either the test result's going to come back negative, which is what we hope, or the test result is going to come back positive. So if the test result is negative and your child's symptoms are improving and the fever is gone, just like it would be pre-COVID, you don't send your child into school with a fever. We all know that. For 24 hours without the use of fever-reducing medicine, your child may return to school with, and Mr. Kaur, this is your or, a note from the healthcare provider indicating the test was negative or just a copy of the test result. So for example, if you did a telemedicine visit with your doctor and the doctor said, why don't you take your child for a COVID test? You do, and then you get a negative result. You don't need to have proof of that telemedicine visit. You can simply show us the negative test result at your school, and that's fine. If you made the phone call to the doctor's office and it went through that way and you were recommended, you may not have the note from the healthcare provider. You might just have a copy of your negative test result, and either one brings you back into school. On the other hand, of course, the doctor could say, get a test, you keep your child home, and then the test result comes back positive. In that case, Albany County Department of Health will be contacting you to follow up. Okay, we would ask that you notify the school. As Mr. Kaur said earlier, as of right now, every case that has come through North Colony, we have found out from the individuals before Albany County, because people call us as soon as they get their positive results, and we really appreciate that. Then we call and confirm with Albany County. But there could be certainly a case where Albany County gets to us first. Either way, Albany County is going to call you and follow up with you. In the case of a positive, your child must remain, and this is the word Mr. Kaur used before, in isolation, which means at home and to the extent practicable, away from others in your household. If you are able to use a separate bathroom for your child, you should do so. If you can't, you want to keep as much separation between that child and the rest of the members of your family, including your pets, until your local health department has released the child from isolation. That typically takes 10 days after the symptom onset. And again, the child's symptoms are improving And again, the child is fever-free for at least 72 hours without the use of fever-reducing medicines. Now, our school nurses will call to check in with you because we see that as part of our service to make sure if there's any way we can be helpful. But Albany County will be checking in with you too, because they will ultimately be the people who say you have to isolate. They're also the people who say, and now you're cleared to go back to school. Or if it's an adult, now you're cleared to go back to work. So if your child is symptomatic, again, the first thing you can do that you should do that we highly recommend, contact the healthcare provider, have a consultation. They may see it as something else and give you an alternate diagnosis. They may tell you to seek a test. They'll help you find a place where you can get a test. Mr. Kaur mentioned a couple. There's another place in what used to be Latham Circle Mall right behind the Bank of America that just recently opened that has test results near us. There's the Rite Aid on Central Avenue. So there are a lot of tests in our local vicinity, as well as the SUNY Albany site. So we're very fortunate where we live that there are a lot of tests pretty local to where we are. Now, this also should be noted. If your child tests positive, and Albany County will tell you this, but we'll just be clear up front, all members of the household will also have to quarantine at home. So again, this goes back to the vocabulary from earlier. The patient, if you will, is in isolation. All members of the immediate household will be told that they have to quarantine until released by the local health department, but that's typically 14 days. So interestingly enough, your child might be able to go back to school earlier than you can go back to work because they'll be for 10 days. Then there's that sort of possible transmission period. You could be for 14 days. Your child will not need to get another test that says it's COVID negative in order to return to school. That will be done through the work with Albany County Department of Health. So that is what if my child is symptomatic. But another question that's coming up a lot lately, and as again we get into the winter and we're indoors more and we're perhaps in confined spaces, what if my child is a direct contact of someone who was displaying symptoms for COVID-19? Now, if your child was a direct contact of someone who is tested positive, we know the answer because it's the same thing as in your house. Your child is going to have to quarantine. So if Albany County determines that your child was a direct contact of someone who is tested positive, they're going to tell you. They're going to take all the decision-making away and say, your child's going to have to quarantine for 14 days. But what if your child comes home and says, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, grandma, hey, grandpa, I just want to say, like, my best friend was coughing all day at school today, and they ended up going home sick, and I was sitting next to them, and you know, I played with them at recess. As a parent, that would make me nervous, and I would wonder, like, like my child was in contact with someone who had symptoms. Maybe that person's going to have COVID, maybe that person's not, maybe they just have allergies, but we're all a little bit on heightened alert. So what if you say, okay, what should I do if that happens? So the first thing to do is, of course, monitor your child's health. So here's now the more nuanced question. What if your child had reported that and a day or two later, now your child shows symptoms? So this isn't just your child sort of waking up, but your child had said to you like, oh boy, somebody was really symptomatic at school. Now we know everybody's not symptomatic, but let's say they tell you that. And now your child starts displaying symptoms. As a parent, I would be like, what do I do? It's a very similar process, except this is a little different. The first one we said we suggest. This one, according to New York State Department of Health, is your child must be evaluated by a healthcare provider within 48 hours of symptom onset. And you can see here, if you go back to what Mr. Kaur explained with the governor and the clusters, we're trying to be good community health partners and do everything possible to stop the spread. So if we don't know if little Johnny, who was the friend of your child, ultimately has COVID or not, but your child starts getting sick, we want to check in on your child as quickly as possible to make sure that they're not continuing to go to school and then they're spreading it to somebody who's spreading it to somebody else. So again, these are really precautionary measures that the state has put in place to keep us all healthy. So the healthcare provider is going to go through the same process with you. They may confirm an alternative diagnosis. If that happens, your child comes to school with a note from the healthcare provider, just like we talked about before. The healthcare provider may say, I'm not sure that there's something else going on. This really could be COVID-19. These are very similar symptoms. I think you should get a test. Your child must stay at home until the results are available. Again, if the test comes back negative, your child comes back to school as long as their symptoms are improving and there's no fever. If it's positive, again, we start the round. Albany County contacts you, child gets isolated, family will need to quarantine. So we want to be careful. We want to be talking to our children. We don't want to scare them, obviously, but we do want to be mindful of the fact that we're going to try to be as conservative as possible so that we make sure that we're doing our best to help stop the spread. If your child starts displaying the symptoms, and let's say for whatever reason, a parent says, I'm not taking them to the doctor. I just don't have time. I can't for whatever reason. Or let's say you do go, you get a test, but let's say it's a little bit later in the winter and things are slower. Right now, we're pretty lucky. Most of our people who have been tested, their test results are coming back within 48 hours. But let's say it's not. Maybe things are going to get slowed down a little bit. If we don't have the evaluation and something signed by a healthcare provider saying it's okay for your child to be back at school, or we don't have the COVID results yet, we must act as if the child is positive. That doesn't mean we're reporting you to Albany County. That doesn't mean I'm reporting on the dashboard that we had a positive case. It just means we're, with no evidence to the contrary, we're going to assume positive until we know better to protect the health and safety of everyone. So that means you ensure that the symptomatic student remains in isolation at home. We follow the protocols for positive students. We notify the local health department. And then once the test results come in, let's say we're just waiting on test results, we follow the protocols depending on what the result is. If it's not test results, if it's I'm not having my child seen within 48 hours, then Albany County will determine when your child can come back to school, which will most likely take us back to that slide, 10 days without a fever and symptoms improving. So without that consultation, and remember, that consultation can be a phone call with Albany County Department of Health. We realize families are busy and we realize families, care desperately about their children, but maybe they just can't get to a doctor's appointment. It's not always easy depending on your job. We all understand that. So it can be telemedicine, it can be a telephone call or an in-person visit. It does not necessarily have to be an in-person visit though. So in all this, we go back to what does the district do? So what is our role in all of this? And I see it as this collaboration and this partnership, which thus far, I have to say I'm the liaison to Albany County Department of Health, and it has been an incredibly positive partnership. They're incredibly responsive, they're incredibly helpful, and they're very concerned about the health and well-being of our staff as well as our students. So we wanted to let you know, since we've had a couple positive cases come up, what happens when we learn about the positive case? So one of two things happens. Either the person tells us themselves that for us right now, that's been every case. We've heard about it from either the employee or the family before Albany County because people know the protocols and we have a very cooperative and helpful community. So as soon as we're alerted to a positive case, we convene what's called the COVID response team, which is part of the directive from New York State. So sitting on the COVID response team are Mr. Kaur, the superintendent, our COVID response coordinator, which is Mrs. Bongermina, who is our director of HR, me, our director of nursing, that's Matt Stein, our communications team members. We are the standing members of the committee. Plus, depending on where the case is, we pull in that particular building administrator, that department supervisor. So if it is an employee who is in the maintenance department, we'll bring in that supervisor. And the PPS, the Pupil Personnel Services Director as appropriate. if it is a student who might receive services from us. So the first thing we know that if the case involves a student, we will need schedules, class rosters, seating charts, bus information. So we already have put in place protocols so that we can quickly gather that, because our job, quite frankly, is to get good quality contact information to Albany County as quickly as possible. So schedules, if it's a 7th through 12th grader, they are in multiple classes, so we'll need their full schedule. If it's an elementary student, we need to know what classes, did they have an art special that day? What was their schedule? Who was in the class with them? Seating charts. And one of the reasons for this is to prioritize the contact tracing. You can imagine contact tracing takes a long time and it's labor intensive. So by providing, for example, let's think of an elementary classroom, a seating chart, then Albany County, we can look at that and we can tell them, these are the people, these are the students who were sitting the closest to the student who tested positive, so that they can go in sort of a priority order as they're working through their contact tracing. Same thing with bus information, both before ride to school and on the way home. We'll provide whoever else is on that bus, and seating information for the buses is currently being collected and synthesized by our transportation department. The building principal or the nurse, most likely the nurse, but it could be the principal, will then follow up with the student, which will most likely be obviously the parent, with an interview so that we can get the most appropriate and pertinent information to Albany County. If the case is an employee, we will need their schedule for the day, what buildings they might have been in, who they might have been in contact with. And the COVID response coordinator, which is Mrs. Bongermina, our HR director, she will follow up with the employee interview, as that'll be a confidential employee interview. I will contact Albany County Department of Health. The first thing I do is confirm the positive case to make sure that there wasn't a misunderstanding, that somebody didn't misread a test result. We confirm, and then I act as the liaison. So I confirm. Once I do, I say, okay, I will follow up with, I get a case manager, I send them information on the contacts, and after we do our investigation so that we get the right information to them. So I'll go through seating charts, I'll go through class rosters, bus information, put together all the information in a memo to them and send it to them so that they can then begin their investigation. At that point, it's all turned over to Albany County unless they have a question when they call me back. We do not do the contacting. Albany County does the contacting. We just give them the best information from school possible. Our communications team, as they have been and as you've been seeing, notifies our Board of Education and the community the information that we are legally allowed to share about the positive case. So what about when this nurse might call you for a follow-up interview? You will also be called by Albany County, but our nurse is, of course, first going to ask, how are you feeling? Because first and foremost, we are concerned about everyone's health and well-being. We're going to confirm the last date that you were in school to make sure that we can say to Albany County, because they're going to do a 48-hour look back. So if you were in school on Thursday, they're going to look back to your contacts on Thursday, Wednesday, and Tuesday. So we'll confirm the last date that the child was in school, or the employee if it happens to be an adult. We'll ask if the child was in school all day or did they leave early. Again, we have records of that, but we want to confirm. We will ask if the child had a mask in class the whole time in each class. And again, none of this is to get anybody in trouble. It is just to kind of help Albany County to assess the risk level. If not, in what class or what place did you not have your mask on? Nobody is getting in trouble if they say, I took my mask off. We're not out to discipline you. We're just out to get the right information so that we can make sure that we're helping you in the best way possible. We'll ask if there were any mask breaks throughout the day. Was it inside or outside? Do you remember what time of day it was or where it was? We'll ask if you took the bus to and from school, because it could very well be that you're typically on a bus, but that day mom dropped you off for whatever reason. So we want to clarify whether the bus was involved or not. If it's a high school student, we want to know if they drove to school and did they have any passengers. We don't think they're not typically having passengers, but we just need to double check and make sure. Did they go to lunch or the cafeteria? That is not happening with our students. That's more a question for adults to make sure that they were eating alone and not in a small space with a colleague with masks off. Did they come into any close contacts with friends or other students during school or outside of school? Again, this is not to get students in trouble. It's just to try to find out the right information. If so, we'll ask with whom they came into contact and for how long. And then, was there any other place that they happened to go during the school day? They might have gone to the nurse's office and been sent home from there. Anywhere else? Did they go to a counseling office? Did they go to the principal's office? And how long were they in those? So that is the district's responsibility. So the nurse who knows you and knows your child will collect that information and turn it over to me. While the nurse is doing that, I will be using the processes we've put in place to get the class rosters, to get the seating charts, to start putting down the information about the closest contact that I can derive from the documents I have. Then I cross-reference the documents with the nurse's information and send all of that to Albany County. And then Albany County and I have another phone call where we go over it together. So it is really a collaboration, and it is a little bit labor intensive, but we need to get the best information possible so that we help people in a very efficient and effective way. So what do I share with the Department of Health? I share any information that we gleaned from that interview, but I also share a list of people who are possible contacts. So let's say it's not your child who is sick, but your child was a possible contact of somebody. I would be giving Albany County your child's full name, the parent and guardian name, home address and phone number, the nature of the contact, sat in the next seat in the classroom, sat on, a row behind them on the bus, etc. And then whether they were a fellow student, whether it was a teacher, a teacher's aide who was in the room. So that will be what I submit to Albany County. The contacts will include any students or staff who had exposure to the individual who's suspected or now confirmed to have COVID-19, beginning, as I said, 2 days prior to the symptom onset, so that's 48 hours, until the case is excluded from school and the person is in isolation. Now, it could be that someone is asymptomatic, but they just went to get a test and then, oh my goodness, I'm positive. In that point, we would use 2 days prior to the date of the test that occurred. So we'll do a 2-day look back. That's particularly important for the high school where they're on an alternating schedule. So you might say, oh, I wasn't even in school that day. Well, it's a 48-hour look back. So if you weren't in school Wednesday, you probably were on Tuesday. So please know that it does look back for 48 hours. We also work with the Department of Health to ensure that if there's before care or after care, for example, if you're in CYC or we send the child to a different daycare, transportation, any extracurriculars, we don't have any right now, but who knows what might come up in our interviews, that we share all of that information so that those people can be identified and notified of their exposure risk. But no, once all this is handed over and Albany County and I have had this conversation back and forth, they take the lead. They then decide who gets quarantined. They then decide for how long. They tell us, we take our directions from them. They are the healthcare professionals. So truly, it's a partnership, and truly my role is to be the liaison and get them the information they need so that they can proceed with their investigation in the most expeditious way possible. So I provide all relevant information. Department of Health determines who should be quarantined and excluded from school. The contacts are quarantined by order of the Department of Health. We can't say that enough for families. I know it's frustrating and it's difficult, but it is a mandate. They are excluded from school for 14 days. They are advised to monitor for symptoms. And it's recommended, if your child is a contact or if you're a contact with somebody at your work environment, it is recommended that you get a diagnostic COVID-19 test at least 3 days after your date of exposure. So this is something we've learned throughout this process when we had our first case with the extended school year program. As soon as somebody finds out that someone you were a contact of has tested positive, it's very much human nature and instinct to say, like, I got to go get a test. I need to get a test right away. Now the advice is that may be too soon. You may have to test yourself again because it may not have been enough time for the virus to be detected in your system. So you will be quarantined for 14 days. The recommendation is if you become symptomatic prior to 3 days, you should get tested. But if you're not symptomatic and you do want to follow the recommendation to get a test, arrange for that test 3 days after the date of exposure. That will give you a better reading of your possible exposure to the virus. The local health department is the one, as we've said, they will initiate any isolation and quarantine orders, and they're also the one who release people from isolation and quarantine. And they will let you know, they will let us know when it is acceptable for somebody to come back. So we just had a case that we reported yesterday. I talked to the Department of Health, and by the end of the day, they were able to say to me, people who are in quarantine can return on this date so that we're aware of exactly when people can come back in. And that's how we're helping with the partnership as well. So that's a lot, and we're all learning as we go. And obviously we know, since we have been first dealing with this virus back in February and March, our knowledge evolves, our understanding evolves, and therefore the guidance evolves. So the first thing we want to let you know is you can always reach out to your North Colony, the school nurse. You can call your building and ask to talk to the school nurse. Our school nurses are up to date. They attend webinars with Albany County Department of Health. They are very up to date on the latest guidance. They are on a listserv. As soon as anything comes out from Albany County, they receive it that very day. So they are a very good resource and they are happy to help. They have fact sheets that they can send you. They also have lists of all the nearby COVID-19 testing locations and information about those testing locations if you don't want to go online. So they're very happy to email that to you if that would be helpful. Matt Stein, who many of you have seen on this call before, he is our Director of Athletics, but he's also our Director of Nursing. You can email him at any time. It's his full name, Matthew Stein, at ncolony.org. He is also attending these webinars. He is closely working with our nurses and meeting with them. He can also be a source of support. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're all learning. There is no question that isn't worth asking. Albany County Department of Health has been very clear with me that they are there to serve the community. Their main number that I have here, and we'll have it posted on our website, is 518-447-4580. You can call that and have, if you want to ask or get some information, if you don't have a healthcare provider and you feel like you have symptoms or somebody in your family has symptoms, you can call that number and they will help you. They also have, and there's a link here, they have a coronavirus update page on their website that is continuously updated. So you can go there if you want to just read. I know for somebody like me, when I'm overwhelmed with something related to health, I want to read as much as I can. Somehow I feel, the knowledge is power. And so that is there for you. And then the information that I shared with you today came from the New York State Department of Health guidance, which they recently released. And it's a toolkit. And I'm just going to click on this link and show it to you. It is incredibly comprehensive, which makes it a terrific resource, but it is incredibly comprehensive. So it sometimes can be an overwhelming resource, which is why we've tried multiple ways to distill the information for you. So the first page is just a nice flowchart that says, like, should I send my child to school today? And it takes you through a series of questions you can ask, whether your child's been exposed, if you've traveled internationally, if you've traveled to a state that's on the banned list for New York State. And it tells you, depending on if your answer is yes or no, what you should do. So that is a very nice, helpful tool for you. So this is where it gets complicated, and this is what we tried to just summarize for you. My child has COVID symptoms. When can they go back to school? So I know I'm keeping them home because up here, this decision-making chart told me, no, my child can't go to school today. So now my next question is, okay, when can they go back? So remember what we said, up here in blue is the healthcare provider evaluation. And again, in-person, video, or telephone. And then the healthcare provider is going to do a couple of different things. They're going to tell you you should get a test. You stay out of school until the test result comes in. Here's what happens if it's positive. Here's what happens if it's negative. Or they could say, oh no, here's what's wrong. Here's the alternate diagnosis, and here's what you have to do. Or this is what happens if they recommend a test, but you don't get the test, or you don't get your child evaluated. This is where your child has to stay home for 10 days. So this is another version that might be helpful to you. If you're more of a visual person, this might be more helpful. This next one page is for staff if they can go to work. It's something you could use if you're trying to figure it out for yourself. Same thing here. This is a staff member who has COVID-19. When can they go back to work? And here's another screening flowchart that just helps you to think about the process by which you can return to work. And this is guidance that we use, but it could certainly help you as well. And when we talk again about the evaluation, when it's consistent with COVID-19, remember the healthcare provider is always, this is the part in blue, going to be your first stop. And that could be the local health department as well. But this is the many different ways that we could proceed. It's either you're going to get a test, you're going to get an alternate diagnosis, or you're not going to go to the healthcare provider and you're going to have be out from school or your work for 10 days. This is the part where people's eyes start glazing over, and it's something that you could easily miss. This is the exclusion protocol for contacts of symptomatic students or staff. So this is, again, your child is a contact of somebody who's symptomatic, not yet deemed a positive COVID case. Because obviously, again, if that were the case, your child would be in quarantine and you would be contacted by the Department of Health. But this is the case. Maybe it's over the weekend and a family member comes over and you think, uh-oh, that person ended up sick before the end of the day and my child was with him. What do I do? This is within 48 hours of your child becoming symptomatic. If your child's not symptomatic, we're fine. If your child starts to develop symptoms, you should get an evaluation within 48 hours, and then we go right back to our flow chart. Alternate diagnosis, no testing done, or a diagnostic test is performed and it's positive or negative, and we do what we should do. If it doesn't occur within 48 hours, we deem it positive until we get different information. And then this is just a little bit more information about what we do when we interact with the Department of Health. So on the slideshow, this is a live link. We're also going to post it tomorrow in the notes on our website because it can be helpful. It is a little bit overwhelming if you just read it cold. So we wanted to go through it to contextualize it. It's getting easier for me because I've been looking at these documents so many times and talking about it so much. But if it's your first time through, and it's also, a point where your child has a high fever and you're a little stressed because of that, it can be overwhelming. So don't hesitate to reach out and talk to our nurse. They're very well equipped to talk you through that decision-making process. You don't have to go it alone, or to reach out to Albany County Department of Health. They want to help you and assist you so that we can get you or your child on the steps to becoming well as soon as possible. So Mr. Kaur, I'm going to turn it back over to you for questions because I'm sure there were plenty. I did move through that quickly.
You did, but you did a great job because there weren't a lot of questions. Karen had a very good question here, though, and I just want to repeat that I tried to answer it in the chat, and I still have parts that I want to further address. So Karen had, for students who have to quarantine are well enough to do their schoolwork, are they allowed to still attend remote instruction? Yes, they are. live instruction. They
Absolutely.
could remote in, if there are 9-12 students, they could remote in to that. How is that going? So I can give you one concrete experience that I've had. I observed an engineering class yesterday where there were students who were remoting in and students who were live on that. That class seemed to be going well. I know teachers report that it's difficult. I'll be candid with you on that. That it's difficult to do that, and I think they are constantly working through that process now. But I think it's going well. We're working to get better at it. It is brand new. It's not optimal and it's not perfect. That's probably the best answer that I can give at this juncture right now. The number of students and staff in quarantine, really cannot speak to that number, but I can tell you it is a very limited number of individuals and has been throughout the year.
True.
I don't know if any of my other colleagues on the call have any comment here on, students who are remoting in live.
Was that the total of the questions that were in the chat so far, Mr. Core?
I think I answered Michelle's. Michelle wanted to know, are rapid tests acceptable for the district? And yes, they are acceptable by the Department of Health. We would not accept anything that hasn't been okayed by the Department of Health. And paying for tests, some tests are free, some are not. So if that's not a free test, I think it's up to whatever your health insurance provider will do.
The rapid test at the Walgreens in Albany is free.
It's free. Yep. And I believe is the Price Chopper one free, Ms. Skills?
I'm not certain.
Is anybody, if you know, but I know Walgreens is free, and so maybe we could, I don't know whether we can come up with a list of free testing sites and maybe publish that. That might be helpful.
It is, Mr. Core, as the nurses update the list of available places for testing, they have information as to whether you need an appointment. Some of them you don't need an appointment, some of them you do, and any cost that might be associated with it. So we do have that. I just don't have that in front of me right now.
Karen has noted that her student who's a 10th grader it's been helpful with the recorded teaching pieces that can be replayed. Thank you. Good feedback. Any other comments here? So just to get a sense here from the PAC, this is interesting to note. So on June 4th, we held our last meeting of the year. And then we were not supposed to have another PAC meeting scheduled until October 28th. I guess we kind of broke that rule in a big way. I'd say we're well into double digits for meetings held. So what I would like to get a sense from the group is October 28th is a Wednesday. Do you want to come back on for that meeting on the 28th, or do you want to make it the 29th and make it a Thursday, or do you want to move to a monthly rotation of the meeting? So I just would appreciate hearing from you on this. And you can think about it if you wish, and you certainly can contact me electronically over the next few days. And, in the interim, I'll assume that we're on for the 28th. Okay, Dina says monthly sounds good. Renee, monthly meetings are good. Karen agrees with monthly meetings. Carly, monthly meetings. Christy, monthly meetings. Karen, monthly meetings. Jenna, monthly meetings. I think there's a trend developing here Dr. Zaida, either's fine with me, bi-monthly or weekly, or bi-monthly or monthly, I think is the correct one, Mark. Okay. So we'll schedule, thank you, Lisa, appreciate it. So we'll schedule for 1 month from today, if that's okay. And if there's a need to come together before then, I certainly can get in touch with you all. And it goes without saying that, yeah, I really mean it. We couldn't do this without you. So very appreciative for all your good work. We are in week 5. And, you know, I'll have to be candid. I think there were times over the summer where we didn't think we were going to make it to week 1. And then if we made it to week 1, we didn't think we were going to make it past weeks 2 or 3. And we're moving along. And I think that, you know, that's through your good work and the good work of our faculty and staff, absolutely. But the contributions you have made to this endeavor are enormous, and we are very grateful for your assistance in this. So,
and I think we've all noticed
we've learned
how the kids are amazing. The kids are just absolutely amazing. They are so adaptable. We were worried, particularly for the younger ones, that they might be scared seeing people in masks. They wouldn't be able to keep their masks on. We were worried about, you know, having to have mask breaks every 15 minutes. You know, now the biggest problem they're having is, you know, they're putting their water bottle up to their mouth and like spilling it all down themselves because they forget to take their masks off. They have been amazing. They're positive. They're really good with being patient at the elementary schools when they're waiting to do hand washing before or after recess. And they seem happy. I mean, I know you don't get to see them during the day, and we have the luxury of seeing them during the day, and they seem happy. And that's an amazing thing to see. So just wanted to share that.
They seem happy, and you know, I've been looking at, you know, we had a soccer game, big soccer game. Boys played Shen, hard fought, lost 2-1, but it was a great contest. Girls played Troy and they won 7-1. I know, Michaela, you've been playing tennis. You know, we've been able to, you know, move through the athletic program. And so I think, you know, it's, you know, extracurriculars are an important part of school. And so I think one of the things that we need to take a look at is, you know, how do we extend it to the other realms of activities? Is there a way somehow that we can safely on a limited scale do performances? Is there a way we could bring back robotics and other activities? Michaela, how's student government been going?
It's been going really well. I mean, obviously this year we're not able to do like some of the things that, you know, we're so used to doing, but we're definitely trying to work on doing things that are virtual. I know just over the past 2 weeks between like the North and the South cohort, we did StuGov interest meetings for the freshmen. So that was really good. But I know we're supposed to have a meeting bright and early Monday morning at 7:45. So looking forward to that. But we do have a lot of good things in the works. So it's going to be a good year. The COVID is not going to get us.
Great. Dina says, I want to say thank you for the junior high open house videos. They were informative, and we appreciate the efforts of the teachers and staff. Dr. Zaida, my kids are very happy and feel great about going to school. Thank you for a thorough and well thought out plan. Thank you. Renee has a question. If remote learners have items that belong to the school from last year, is that something that can get dropped off to the school? I think, yeah, just call into the school, make the arrangement, and do the drop off. Yes. Lisa, would love to see school spirit days K-6 remote too. That's that's very interesting. We had a PTA council meeting last night, and that was part of what we were trying to do is take a look at, how would we generate some of those spirit activities and do them remotely and make them fun. Yeah, well, good point. Renee, remote learning is going smoothly too. I wish there was a way to hold students accountable for specials. It seems difficult with asynchronous schedules. doing the best we can on that. And I know our music and our teachers are working hard on that. I certainly can get back to those departments and look into that. And you had Spirit Days at Fourth Ferry. That's great. And I know at the beginning, absolutely. And I know at the beginning of the year, there were game nights, trivia nights that the high school held as part of freshman orientation. So there are a variety of things that we could do. That's absolutely the case. And I know there are activities that are being planned for Halloween as well. Well, again, I want to thank you all for your wonderful support, and we will be on 1 month from today. So I would say that would be on or about, I think that would be about the 12th of November. Okay, I'm not sure. That is done in my head. I hope Thursday is the 12th, but I think it is. So that's about the time it would be. So thank you. And have a wonderful evening, and take care.
Thank
Be
you.
safe, be well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Good night.